all thinking of ownership as a way of getting ahead, the organization is going to get ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello and welcome to a father-daughter podcast, where we explore leadership, culture, and the future of business through the lens of tradition and innovation. I'm Rohit Gera. I'm the Managing Director of Gera Developments, and with me is my daughter, Diya. Today we're going to talk about culture, and I want to start by asking Diya, what is your understanding? How do you see culture? What does culture mean to you in an organization?
So I truly believe that culture is not just the big moments. I think it's the smaller moments on a day-to-day basis. It's about how you interact with your colleague. It's about how you respond when there's a crisis. It's whether there's a fear of failure. And I think culture defined on paper very often ends up being different from the culture of these actions. And so, for example, is there a culture of a fear of failure, or is there a culture where you take ownership if you make a mistake? You own your job.
Right.
And I think that impacts job satisfaction. That impacts how you perceive success in the organization. So I think culture is actually more the smaller moments rather than the big moments that is organized or that is dictated by management.
So when you talk about dictated by management, right? Management comes up, you put something on paper, but how do you see the role of leaders, different leaders leading their own teams? How does that work when it comes to cultures within sub-teams versus culture of the organization?
So I think you have to have harmony across, my view personally is you have to have harmony across the different cultures. You need to have some elements where all the leaders are speaking the same language, but each subculture will be at the level of, and I remember reading this somewhere, with the number of people who can share a pizza. So there's a subculture.
Explain that.
So what I mean by that is a team should be the size of the number of people who can share one pizza.
Okay.
And that's actually when you build the strongest team. And in those bonds is where you will always find subcultures that exist. So it's the leader, I believe it's the manager's responsibility to make sure that the organization's values are represented through all the different subcultures that exist. Like, I'll give you an example. The culture that you would have in our organization for sales, right? Is an ambitious culture, is a push, get things done, sort of very high drive culture.
Right.
I'm not saying that doesn't exist in a function like CRM, which is customer facing, or any of our customer facing functions, but their culture focus needs to be much more customer first, needs to be much more the softer aspect,
right,
and the empathetic aspect, the more understanding aspect to say, okay, I'll take a moment to hear you out.
Right.
And so you have to allow for those subcultures, because if CRM took that same ambitious sort of, and let me use the word cutthroat, but in a positive manner, you would ruin the experience on the outside. So
right,
you have to allow for subcultures as long as the leaders are ensuring that the values are all met. That's strongly what I believe in. And I think one of those aspects would be around ownership, right?
Okay.
And I want to actually ask you about that, is to say, how do you see ownership as a value, as a culture, sort of across teams, across an organization? How important do you think it is?
Good question. I think it's so important. The culture of ownership, really, as you grow an organization, and it's critical.
Yeah.
Because what that means is people are focused on, when you think as an owner, you're focused much more on the outcome than just getting the job done.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had to get this done, I got it done. But did I get it done in a manner that's positive as far as the organization is concerned?
Yeah.
Did I get it done on time so that the person who's taking my work product and taking it forward is able to do it in time, right? Am I doing the work in a manner where the quality of the work product is such that it doesn't need to come back and need a rework?
Absolutely.
So I think a culture of ownership is extremely important, and I do think that in our organization we do need to drive and move towards a far greater culture of ownership. I see it in pockets and I see it with certain people, but I think the need to drive it across the organization. I mean, imagine, if you will, an organization where top to bottom, everybody functions
How
with
powerful.
with a mindset of ownership, right?
Yeah.
Of delivery as promised, delivering on time. You know, if you turn around and say, oh, so if somebody else in another team thinks about, let's say CRM, for example, take a specific example, legal preempts and thinks of what CRM may need,
Yeah.
right, and comes up with it before. That's the culture of ownership. And organizations can soar and fly and do so well when there is a culture of ownership in the organization.
Do you think that the culture of ownership also extends to, and I know the examples you took, but do you also think it extends to your personal growth and your ambition, to say you own your job and you own your career? How do you view that?
You're 100% right. If you were, and think about it for your own teams, who would you promote more, faster?
Yeah.
Who would you give greater responsibility to? Somebody who just says, okay, you gave me this task and I got it done, or somebody who's thinking of the bigger picture, somebody who's thinking further ahead,
Yeah.
somebody who's thinking about the impact to customer, impact to organization, impact to other co-workers. Clearly, the person who you would value would be the person who's showing greater ownership. So it's completely a mantra for success, not just of the organization, but of the individual.
Yeah.
And therefore, if individuals thought about ownership as a way of themselves to get ahead, and now you put together a group of people who are all thinking of ownership as a way of getting ahead, the organization is going to get ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think I'd add to that, right, to say the job satisfaction that you also get when you're working in an organization where I don't need to follow up for something that I need. I don't need to answer my boss and say, I couldn't get this done because so-and-so didn't give it to me.
Yeah.
Right? That just demotivates it, demoralizes you. हाँ देखेंगे SOP में नहीं है तो जाके go get an approval.
Yeah.
All those aspects.
Yeah.
I think it would change even people's job satisfaction if there was a culture of ownership.
I completely agree. You said SOP, and one of the challenges that we've seen is people turn around and say, oh, my turnaround time in the SOP says 7 days. Why are you pushing to get me this done in 3 days?
Yeah.
Right? But an ownership culture says, what is the fastest I can get it done in? Let me get it done in that much time.
Yeah.
Not hide behind a document, or I've got so much time, let me do it in that much time.
Yeah.
That actually is the culture of toxicity.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Where
I would
everybody
understand
turns
that.
around and says, this is the amount of time I have, so let me stretch it to the max. And that's the culture of, let me do the minimum that I need to do.
Yeah.
And that's just god awful.
I hear you, and do the minimum that I need to do in terms of when the SOP then it goes into action. But I honestly think when the SOP was designed and the people putting the TATs in place and the turnaround times in place, they were thinking what can go wrong, and therefore for out of the 100 situations or scenarios in which this will come up, there may be this issue in 2 of those scenarios,
Therefore
and provide the extra time. But we never went down, and organizations I think very often don't go down the path of saying, okay, as long as 95% is within this shorter time, we're allowing for certain deviations.
Correct.
And certain, and I think that's and if we talk about what is culture, right, I think that's such a core example of what is culture in a very micro, subtle manner.
Yeah.
It's not the outward. It's not the,
Correct.
oh, let's come and have an event where everyone comes together and talks about owning your job or owning your career. But I believe it's in things like, it's in things like the SOP and how an SOP is implemented. It's in things like how you come in for a meeting, and whether the meeting has an agenda, and whether someone leaves that meeting with minutes and follow-up is done, and you close your action items without follow-up. It's in those moments that I think is where your culture lies.
Correct.
And you mentioned the word toxicity. So I want to ask you a question around where does the trade-off lie? Suppose you had a leader who's extremely talented at what they do, right? Owns their job. Let's take that as the example.
Right.
Meets all your values. Is delivering whatever they need to, and in fact maybe even say more.
Okay?
Right? But compare that to the other side where they have a negative impact and an influence on their team because hypothetically, let's say their language is not okay with the team.
Right.
Right? So it's building a toxic culture. What would you pick? What is the trade-off? How do you make a decision in that situation?
Yeah, that's a hard call for a leader, right? On one hand, all leaders are required to perform. You have somebody in your team who's performing. But, and in your example, they're performing, but they're, let's say, being abusive with people below to get the job done. I think one has to look at, eventually you have to go towards the main part of the culture, okay? The way I would do this is you would bring the person in, you would say, look, this is unacceptable to us, right? If you're not going to change this, you don't have a place in the organization. It's very hard because you're performing, right? You're getting the delivery. Like I hear all the time that, at the construction site, to get the work done, you have to shout at people, you have to be abusive towards people. I'm sorry, that's not required.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just not required. And I've seen leaders, people who've led projects with us, who've managed to do it successfully by being positive and by being motivating, rather than drive them through, demotivation and negativity.
Yeah.
So you need to ask the question, and I've seen this even within our organization. We had an individual who worked with us for a long time, right? Moved into a managerial position and was operating in what I'll call the toxic sort of side.
Okay.
Right? And what I realized is that individual who joined us a long time ago has only seen leaders who led in that manner.
Yeah.
Okay? So then the responsibility lies on us at the senior level to say, okay, can we get this individual to change? You need to counsel.
Yeah.
Right? You need to counsel, you need to cajole, you need to explain, you need to give them the opportunity, you need to give them coaching as an example.
Yeah.
Right? If after all of that, if they don't make the change,
then there has to be an exit
they need to go.
plan.
They need to go. Because in the long run, what that does for the organization and for the leadership is it says that you're not sincere. It says that what you say only stays on paper.
Yeah.
It says that as an organization, you value the output more than the person's feeling.
Yeah.
And either you decide that that's what you want to be.